evening and welcome to Shep's Chat 1001 Campaigning for Office based on Chapter 10 as well as the elections reading that was on Classroom. Your learning targets for this chapter are as follows: to explain the eligibility of requirements for the President, Senator, and Representative, produce a plan for a modern campaign, discuss the role of the print, electronic, and social media, demonstrate an understanding of the evolution of campaign finance regulation, and describe the general outline of today's campaign for the presidency. All right, so the function of an election. Most of the time, elections are to choose a representative to make a decision on your behalf. Every once in a while, we have referendums where we vote based on like a single decision, such as should we legalize marijuana, should the drinking age be lowered, etc. But most of the time, it is candidate versus candidate or candidate versus incumbent. And an incumbent is the person that is already holding the office. Elections that are free and fair are the best way to hold incumbents, the person already in office, responsible for their choices. So in the United States, we have elections where there are numerous people on the ballot most of the time. In countries like North Korea, they have elections. However, those elections are not free and fair elections. Instead, you can only vote for one candidate. That doesn't hold anybody responsible or make them ethical leaders. That's part of being a totalitarian leader. All right, voting is the most common way for us to participate in political activity, and yet we still really don't do it all that much. There's a couple of reasons for that. Mobility, as people move around, they don't really know how to register to vote, where they're going to vote at. In our small local communities, it seems really obvious. You vote at the village hall, you vote at the church, you vote at the school. In larger cities, where you vote is based on your precinct, and for some people that can be really hard. You have to do some research, you have to try to figure it out. Also, a lot of people don't understand that their vote will make a difference. So they don't see what the purpose is in voting. All right, who votes for who? The constituents are the people that vote. So we are constituents. We are the people that those representatives, so whether you are a state representative, whether you are a federal representative in the House of Representatives or the Senate, whether you're the President of the United States, we are their constituents. So we have municipal elections. That would be for people like mayors, board members, the school board, a municipal judge. Then you're going to have district elections. So those are your state representatives, the people that go to Madison and make decisions that are for the state, as well as the members of the House of Representatives. So Paul Ryan is our district representative inside the House of Representatives in Washington, D.C. He also just happens to be the Speaker of the House. You also have statewide elections. That's going to be for your 2 senators. So everybody in the state of Wisconsin gets to vote on those 2 senators. And we also vote for our state Supreme Court justices in the state of Wisconsin. Every 4 years, we have national elections where we elect the president. And that is something that happens on the same day for every single state. There are different types of voting. Plurality voting is when the candidate who receives the most votes wins. That does not necessarily have to be 50% or more. If there's 3 candidates and one person gets 46% of the vote, but they don't get that 50, they can still win. Majority voting means if there were 3 candidates and nobody gets to 50%, then you're going to have a runoff election. So you can only have runoff elections when you use majority voting. In the majority system, runoff elections is to make sure that one person gets 50% of the votes. So if there are originally 3 people, the top 2 vote getters would go again, and the person that ended up with 50% of the vote in that case would then be elected. All right, how do we vote? You can have 2 choices. You can vote straight party, which means that you are really, really conservative. You don't want any Democrats there, so you're going to vote all Republican. Or you are really, really liberal. You don't want any Republicans there, so you are going to vote all Democrats. Now, I might have screwed that up, but I think you guys know what I mean. Okay, although parties are important, they're not even really addressed in the Constitution. Nowhere does it talk about the political parties. So straight party voting is not the only option. As a matter of fact, many people do what's called ticket splitting. And ticket splitting is where people vote for a Republican for the House of Representatives and a Democrat for president, or vice versa. It doesn't matter. It just means that they did not vote all the way down for one party. Primaries, that is when the candidates from the same parties go head-to-head against each other. Those are held in January of the election year, and they run for 5 months when it comes to the presidency. So the very first one is going to be held in Iowa, and then for the next 5 months before the national convention, there's going to be primaries in different states. In Wisconsin, by the time it gets to us, a lot of times decisions have already been made, and our primaries don't seem to matter quite as much. In some states, they use proportional allocation to determine how the votes are given between the candidates. All the Democratic primaries do this, and some of the Republicans. So if you receive 40% of the state's votes, then you would get 40% of the convention's delegates when it goes to the national convention time. So you don't get all of the votes for your state, you get what you got voted for. In a winner-take-all allocation, it's exactly what it sounds like. This is only done in some of the Republican primaries, and it's the candidate who gets the most votes gets all of the delegates at the state convention. So if they get 10 delegates for their state, even if they only got 60% of the votes, they are only going to get, they would get all 10. In the proportional allocation, if they got 60%, they would get 6. This is done only in the primaries. This is not for the presidential elections. I repeat, this is not for the presidential elections. This is only for the primaries. All right. After the primaries are held, we have a national convention, and at this time, the delegates nominate a candidate. There's going to be a Democratic National Convention, there's going to be a Republican National Convention, and there's going to be a bunch of third-party national conventions that nobody's going to care about. When they nominate the Republican and the Democrat National Convention nominees, the people have already chosen a VP by that point, but they are also formally nominated at that time. During the National Convention, they discuss the party platform, as well as attract public attention by using speeches and getting additional television coverage for their causes. Once elected, most of the time, presidents feel as if they have a mandate. A mandate means that they have the power to go along with their policies that they presented in the election. So in this case, Donald Trump would say, I have a mandate to build a wall. I told people I would build a wall. People voted for me. The Electoral College elected me. I should build a wall. This also happens because the congressional candidates ride the coattails of the president, and then they get elected in larger numbers than the opposing party. So if you have a Republican president and the rest of the House of Representatives and the Senate ride their coattails, then that is going to be seen as if an even larger mandate. So if we think about the tax issue that is currently going through, the majority of both houses of Congress are controlled by Republicans. The presidency is controlled by a Republican. That is a pretty big mandate for tax reform based on conservative values. They are almost through getting that processed. That is a big win, and that's part of the mandate that the president feels he has. All right, an election cycle is a 2-year period between general elections, and it's the time that the people have to convince their constituents to vote for them. So it's basically for a member of the House of Representatives, as soon as they're elected, they're running for re-election again. In all honesty, for the president who runs in 4 years, as soon as he's elected, he starts running for election again. So the day after the election, candidates and party officials and interest groups start thinking about what is the next step in their campaign. So if their party didn't win, they might look at who will be easier to beat in the next election. So they're going to pick states that are probably more purple and focus in on those states. How will it be best to spend their resources? And then are there any open seats? Is there any candidate or incumbent who is not planning to run again? Because those open seats are easier to take. Incumbents get reelected in astonishing large numbers. So it is not easy to run against an incumbent. It is much, much easier to win an open seat than it is to win an incumbent seat. All right, who has the upper hand? The incumbent. This is called the incumbency effect, and that's the person already in office, as we talked about. The majority of people don't like Congress, but they like their congressman. There was a super cool chart in your readings on Classroom that outlined how so many people don't like their congressman or don't like Congress, but they love their congressman. The reason why we love our congressmen is we can relate to their voting record. They can give us pork. Pork is benefits that you give to your constituents as a thank you for voting for you. A lot of times people think of Alaska's bridge to nowhere. So it gave a bunch of people jobs, it spent a bunch of federal money, but it had no purpose. Name recognition. I know who Paul Ryan is. I have no idea who the other guy is. So I'll probably vote for Paul Ryan. The incumbent is for sure going to have experience campaigning. If the other person doesn't have the same amount of experience campaigning, they might have trouble winning. And then visibility. Paul Ryan is constantly on TV. His opponent, not constantly on TV. So the incumbents have visibility, they have network coverage. It just makes it easier for them to win. Right? If things are going well in the economy, it is way easier for the incumbents to stay in. However, every once in a while we have wave elections, and that's when the economy is not doing so well. We've been in an unpopular war, and those are not good for incumbents. But over the last 60 years, even in those wave elections, the incumbency rate was still well above 80%. All right, incumbents are always campaigning. Why are they always campaigning? Because they have to keep their constituents happy and they have to raise funds. If they continue to raise funds, if they make their constituents happy, they're going to hold off any serious competition. So no strong competition is going to come along if they see that Paul Ryan has the support of most of the people that are his constituents. Paul Ryan has a ton of money. Why would I want to spend my resources campaigning against him? Why would the Democrats want to spend their resources campaigning against Paul Ryan? All right, once you decide you're going to run for election, you need a campaign staff. There are paid and there are volunteer staff. And that's going to be in the hundreds of thousands of people when you get to be president, when you're running for president. Lots of college students volunteer. It's something that you can do as internships if you are interested in political science as a career later on down the road. Government employees cannot campaign on company time. So back in the day, Hillary Clinton had to resign as Secretary of State before running for office in 2016 because she would not have been able to campaign while she was performing the duties of Secretary of State. That would have been against the rules. So they just resign most of the time. One of their jobs is to get out the vote, the campaign staff specifically, and that is to get people out on election day and then just get them involved in general. So get out the vote, get out there, participate in politics, especially for their party. Campaign staff helps develop platforms and it also prepares candidates for the debates. All right, we've already talked about campaign finance in class quite a bit with Buckley v. Vallejo. There's a difference between campaign expenditures and contributions. That's the main idea that you need to get out of that reading, that candidates can expend as much money as they want. That's their First Amendment right. However, people are not allowed to donate as much as they want to a candidate. The candidate can spend as much as they want, but people cannot donate as much as they want. We have the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, and that was an act that was put through with Republican and Democratic support, and it limited soft money, which is unregulated money going into the campaigns. That has since been changed up a little bit with Citizens United versus the FEC, the Federal Elections Commission. The Federal Elections Commission kind of makes the rules and guidelines for voting and elections, and they say that you cannot put limitations on donations for unions and corporations because that is protected First Amendment free speech. All right, the advertisements that we use. We've talked a lot about advertisements in class, so we're not going to go into too much. But negative campaign ads do not always work. There's no strong data that says that being a negative campaign is helpful. It sometimes does work. Lyndon Johnson ran against Barry Goldwater, and he ran an ad that had a little girl and a daisy, and it made people think that Barry Goldwater would lead us to nuclear war. And it's one of the reasons why Barry Goldwater doesn't get elected is because all of the Americans instantly had this idea. So negative campaign ads have been around for a really long time. And it's not that they're never successful, but they don't have like 100% success rate. So thinking that doesn't work. In conclusion with voting, there's this paradox of voting, it's called. And why do people vote or not vote? And a lot of people don't vote because they look at it as costly and don't believe it's going to change the election outcome very much. So we don't really think of it as costly because I just have to go up to the village hall. But in general, it is costly to people that don't know about it, that have to travel a distance, that feel like they would have to take off of work, and they believe that it stands little chance of changing the election outcome. That's a terrible thought. And although I have to tell you about it because it's like a vocab idea, it's not true. It doesn't cost you hardly anything to vote. And you expressing your opinion is your right as an American citizen, and you should be participating in it and doing that. Okie dokie, look at that. I got all of a Shep's chat done in one Shep's chat. Yay, me. Bye, guys.